It is February 2026. Right now, billions of eyes are fixed on a small, jagged corner of northern Italy. The Milano Cortina Winter Olympics have arrived. The lights are blinding. The ceremonies are a masterpiece of Italian flair. The politicians are on stage speaking about a new renaissance and the unstoppable spirit of the Italian economy. But before the first gold medal is even minted, I need to tell you a truth that cannot be undone. Italy is not hosting these games because it is wealthy. It is hosting them because it is desperate. Since the last time the Olympic flame was lit on Italian soil in 2006, the world has changed. China rose, Silicon Valley swallowed the global market, the Eurozone weathered a decade of fire, and through all of it, the Italian economy did something remarkable. It stayed perfectly, hauntingly still. In real terms, the Italian GDP is almost exactly where it was 20 years ago. This isn't just a sports story, this is a liquidation sale of the future to pay for a 16-day party in the present. You might be watching this from a flat in London, a suburb in Texas, or a high-rise in Singapore thinking, why does a regional sporting event in the Alps matter to me? It matters because the Milano Cortina Games are the ultimate test case for a terrifying economic experiment. It's an experiment you're likely already living through in your own country. It's the belief that if you cannot fix the structural rot of a nation, the aging population, the debt, and the lack of innovation, you can simply build a shiny enough distraction to keep the investors from looking at the foundation. You were never asked if you wanted to participate in this experiment, but you were locked in the moment the first contract was signed. Meet Luca. Luca is 54. He spent 30 years building this cafe. 6 months ago, he was told that a new high-speed rail link would bring 10,000 tourists a day to his doorstep. He was told it was now or never. So Luca did what the government did. He took the debt. He borrowed €50,000 to renovate. He bought a high-end espresso machine that he can't quite afford. He is the personification of the Olympic dream. But Luca doesn't know what we know. He doesn't see that he is a specific character in a specific tragedy. He's the man buying a ticket for a ship that has already hit the iceberg. He is experiencing the sugar high of construction, but the insulin crash is already scheduled for Monday morning after the closing ceremony. This is not about skiing. It is about a hidden mechanism I call the Olympic ghost. It is the process where a nation uses a massive infrastructure injection to mask a terminal demographic collapse. It is a solution that doesn't just fail, it mutates into a worse problem. Once you see the math behind the medals, the logic of the sustainable Olympics falls apart. You start to realize that every stadium built today is a monument that a shrinking pool of Italian taxpayers will have to maintain for a tomorrow that doesn't have enough people to fill them. We are going to look at the blood on the balance sheet. We are going to see how the very infrastructure meant to save Italy is actually accelerating its isolation. This gets uncomfortable fast. But if you want to understand why your own city's growth feels like a lie, you need to see how the miracle in Milan was actually constructed. Welcome to the end of the party. To understand the scale of the gamble, we have to look at the injection. The Italian government didn't just invite the Olympics, they invited a flood. The official price tag for the Milano Cortina Games is currently sitting at €5.3 billion. But here is where the math gets insulting. I want you to look at this number, really look at it. 92%. According to the latest audits, 92% of the infrastructure budget is being covered by state grants. In a country with a debt-to-GDP ratio hovering around 140%, the government isn't just spending money it doesn't have. It's spending money it has already promised to your grandchildren. You might be thinking, fine, it's expensive, but it's an investment. Infrastructure is the engine of growth. Those roads and rails will stay long after the athletes leave. That is a logical, smart assumption. It's also exactly what the system wants you to believe. Let's look at the red zone of the balance sheet. Italy has spent nearly €2 billion on what they call essential public works. This includes a high-speed rail link and new highway bypasses in the Valtellina Valley. On paper, it looks like progress. But here is why that assumption fails. This infrastructure is being built into a demographic vacuum. Italy's working-age population is shrinking faster than any other major economy in Europe. In the very regions where we are laying down billions in asphalt, the population is projected to drop by 20% over the next 2 decades. We aren't building a highway for a growing workforce. We are building a very expensive runway for a population that is departing. Back in Cortina, Luca is feeling the first side effects of the adrenaline shot. You see, when you pump 5 billion euros into a localized mountain economy, you don't get growth. You get localized hyperinflation. The price of local timber has doubled. The cost of labour has tripled because every able-bodied worker is busy building the bobsled run. Luca's renovation, the one he took a €50,000 loan for, is now over budget. He needs another €20,000 just to finish the terrace. He's playing himself. He's paying Olympic prices for a cafe that will only have Olympic customers for 16 days. But wait, it gets worse. Think of the Italian economy as a house with a leaking roof, a failing furnace, and a foundation that is sinking into the mud. Instead of fixing the plumbing, the owner decides to host the most expensive dinner party in the neighbourhood. They buy the finest silver, the best champagne, and a chandelier that costs more than the mortgage. The implication: the party will be legendary. People will talk about the sparkle of that chandelier for years. But the next morning the roof is still leaking, the furnace is still dead, and now the owner is broke. Congratulations. You've just witnessed the healthy doping of a nation. We've ignored the structural decay of the South and the brain drain of the youth to ensure that for 2 weeks in February the Alps look like a postcard. But the adrenaline is starting to wear off. While the government was busy spending €132 million on a sliding centre in Cortina, they forgot to check the one variable they couldn't bribe with state grants. The snow is melting. Now you might think the solution is just to make more snow. Wrong. That's where the nightmare truly begins. Welcome to the afterlife of an Olympic dream. To understand where Italy is going in 2026, we have to look at where it died in 2006. This is Cesena Pariol. 20 years ago, the Italian government spent €110 million here to build the world's most advanced bobsled run. It was a masterpiece of engineering. It was used for exactly 16 days. Today, it is a graveyard of rusted ammonia pipes and crumbling reinforced concrete. Why? Because a bobsled track isn't a stadium. It's a life support machine. It requires constant, expensive electricity to keep the ice frozen, and a specialised crew to maintain the structure. When the cameras left, the local government looked at the bill and realised they had a choice. They could either fund their local schools, or they could keep a concrete tube frozen for 6 athletes who didn't even live in the province. They chose the schools. The track died. And the €110 million, it's just debt that hasn't finished being paid off yet. I want you to look at this number. Really look at it. €2,200,000. That is the estimated annual maintenance cost for a single high-end sliding centre in the modern era. €2.2 million every single year, whether a single person uses it or not. If you build it, the debt doesn't end. It just begins a new, permanent phase of extraction. Now, here is where the math gets insulting. You might think we learned our lesson. You might think that in 2026 we would look at the ruins of 2006 and say, never again. Congratulations, you've just played yourself. Instead of using existing tracks in Austria or Switzerland, which were offered for a fraction of the price, Italy decided to build a brand new sliding centre in Cortina. The cost? €132 million just to build it. They call it the Legacy Project. But in economic terms, legacy is just a marketing word for a liability that hasn't been repossessed yet. The assumption, you might be thinking, but Cortina is different. It's a world-class luxury destination. They can afford to keep it open. It will attract high-end sports tourism that Turin couldn't. That sounds like a smart, market-driven argument. It's exactly what the developers told the Italian taxpayers. Let's look at the numbers. There are currently fewer than 50 professional bobsled and skeleton athletes in the entire nation of Italy. To make that €132 million facility break even, every one of those athletes would need to pay a membership fee of roughly €2.6 million per year. Why is the assumption wrong? Because a sports tourism for niche events doesn't scale. You can't build a mass-market economy on a sport that requires a €50,000 sled and a death wish. You aren't building an asset for the community. You're building a private club for the elite, subsidized by the person working the cash register at the supermarket. Let's check back in with Luca. His terrace is done. He's ready for the gold rush. But something is happening that he didn't see in the brochures. Because the government poured all the legacy money into these massive stadiums and sliding centres, they ran out of budget for the things that actually make a town livable. The local hospital in the valley just announced a reduction in staff. The local bus route that workers use to get to his cafe has been cut to optimise for the Olympic shuttles. Luca is standing on a €70,000 terrace in a town that's becoming too expensive for his own employees to live in. The Olympic ghost is moving in. It's making the real estate prices soar, which sounds great for Luca's net worth, but it's killing his business. If your barista can't afford the rent in the town where they work, your cafe isn't a business anymore. It's a ticking clock. But wait, it gets worse. Imagine you have a credit card that is already maxed out. Your bank is calling you every hour. Your car is about to be repossessed. So what do? You go out and buy a 100-inch 8K television. But you tell yourself it's okay. Why? Because the TV is Energy Star rated. It's sustainable. It's a green investment for your home entertainment needs. You're still broke. You still can't pay the mortgage. But now you're broke in high definition. Let's talk about the green lie. The Milano Cortina organisers promised these would be the most sustainable games in history. They said they would use 90% existing venues. I want you to look at the reality. To make those existing venues meet modern Olympic standards, the cost of renovation has actually exceeded the cost of building new ones in some cases. It's a dark comedy. We are spending hundreds of millions to fix buildings that should have been demolished years ago, just so we can put a sustainable sticker on the side of the debt. And this brings us to the most uncomfortable realization of all. Why would a rational government do this? Why would they build a €132 million track for 50 people in a town that is shrinking? Because in the world of the Olympic ghost, activity is mistaken for growth. As long as the cranes are moving, as long as the concrete is being poured, the GDP numbers look healthy for a quarter or two. It allows the politicians to stand in front of a camera and say, "Look, we are creating jobs." They don't mention that the jobs are temporary, the workers are often brought in from outside the region, and the long-term debt is permanent. Let that sink in. We are literally carving up the physical beauty of the Alps to create a short-term accounting trick. But here's the terrifying twist. Even if Luca survives the debt, even if the government pays for the maintenance, even if the tourists show up, the system has one more rug pull waiting. Because the Olympics aren't just fighting a battle against debt and demographics, they are fighting a battle against physics. You might think that as long as we have the money we can have the winter. Wrong. Welcome to the era of the artificial games. In the world of economic storytelling, we talk about liquidity. Usually that means cash flow. But in the 2026 Winter Olympics, liquidity is literal. It is the sound of €5 billion of infrastructure melting into the soil of the Italian Alps. According to environmental impact reports for the Milano Cortina Games, up to 80% of the snow used during the competitions will be artificial. We aren't hosting a Winter Olympics. We are hosting a refrigeration Olympics. History doesn't repeat, but it is screaming at us right now. In 1924, at the first Winter Games in Chamonix, the snow was a gift from the sky. In 2026, the snow is an industrial product manufactured by thousands of high-pressure cannons, consuming millions of gallons of water and enough electricity to power a small city. Congratulations, you've just industrialized the weather. You might be thinking, so what? We have the technology. We've been making snow for decades. If the climate is changing, we just adapt. That's what humans do. We build our way out of the problem. That sounds like the ultimate triumph of human ingenuity. It's the innovation pitch that sold the International Olympic Committee on Italy's bid. Let's look at the energy sink. To produce the artificial snow required for the 2026 Games, Italy is deploying a fleet of over 3,000 snow cannons. These machines don't just make snow. They require a specific combination of wet bulb temperature, a mix of humidity and cold to function. Here is why the assumption fails. As the Alps warm at twice the global average, those windows of cold are slamming shut. In many of the low-altitude venues chosen for 2026, the temperature is staying above the threshold for snowmaking, even in the middle of the night. It is like buying a state-of-the-art air conditioner for a house that doesn't have a roof, and then realizing the power grid is down. Luca is standing behind his cafe counter. He's looking at his water bill. His eyes go wide. He looks at a local newspaper headline, "Water rationing for small businesses." To feed those 3,000 snow cannons, the regional government has had to build massive collection basins, artificial lakes carved into the mountain. Where does that water come from? It's diverted from the local water table. The same water table that feeds Luca's cafe, the local farmers, and the mountain ecosystem. Last summer, the drought in northern Italy was so severe that the Po River nearly vanished. Now, in the winter, the water that should be recharging the aquifers is being frozen and sprayed onto a mountain so a skier from Norway can go 80 miles per hour for 30 seconds. Luca's water costs have jumped by 40%. He's being told to conserve while he watches 1 million gallons of water being blasted into the air across the valley. This is the dark comedy of the sustainable games. To be green, we are draining the blue. But wait, it gets worse. Imagine you are planning a dinner party, but instead of having everyone in your dining room, you decide to serve the appetizer in your kitchen, the main course in your neighbour's basement 3 blocks away, and the dessert in a park on the other side of the city. To make this work, you have to buy a fleet of Ferraris to shuttle guests between the courses. You have to hire 10 different cleaning crews. You have to build 3 different kitchens. This is the Milano Cortina model. Because there isn't enough snow or infrastructure in one place, the games are spread across 22,000 square kilometres. The efficiency is gone. You've replaced a compact, manageable event with a logistical nightmare that requires thousands of extra vehicle trips, thousands of extra heated rooms, and a carbon footprint that makes the zero-emission promise look like a sick joke. To connect these scattered venues, Italy is spending over €2 billion on Olympic roads that are being cut through protected alpine forests. Roads that, according to economic models, will be 90% empty 3 weeks after the Games end. I want you to look at this number. Really look at it. 500. That is the number of centuries-old larch trees cut down in Cortina just to make room for a bobsled track that the International Olympic Committee didn't even want Italy to build. Let that sink in. We are destroying the very environment that makes the Alps a tourism destination in order to host a nature sporting event. It is a metaphor for the entire Italian economy. It is construction as a substitute for growth. You see, if you can't grow your tech sector, and you can't fix your birth rate, and you can't lower your national debt, you do the only thing you know how to do. You pour concrete. Concrete is tangible. Concrete looks like activity. Concrete creates jobs for the construction unions today, even if it creates a maintenance nightmare for the taxpayers tomorrow. Let's say you achieve the impossible. Let's say the weather holds. Let's say the cannons work. Let's say the guests are shuttled between the kitchens and the park without a hitch. Wrong. The hard part hasn't even started. The high-speed rail that cost billions to connect Milan to the mountains, it has just turned Cortina into a day-trip destination. The luxury hotels that Luca hoped would fill his cafe, they're half empty because the new tourist can now stay in a cheaper hotel in Milan and be on the slopes in 2 hours. The local culture, the quiet, alpine, slow life that people paid a premium for, has been replaced by a highway-side service station vibe. Luca's cafe is full, yes, but it's full of people who are in a rush. They buy a quick espresso, use his bathroom and leave. The average revenue per customer has plummeted. Luca's renovation debt is still €70,000, but his customer lifetime value has just been decapitated by the very infrastructure that was supposed to save him. This is the reality distortion of the Olympic ghost. It builds a version of the world that doesn't exist for people who aren't staying. Because the government knows this, the economists know this, the planners know this, but they can't stop. To admit the 2026 Games were a mistake would be to admit that the entire model of Italian growth for the last 30 years has been a failure. So they double down. They built another basin, they cut another forest, they borrow another billion. We've come this far, they say, we can't stop now. But there is one thing that doesn't care about sunk costs. There is one thing that doesn't care about political legacies or adrenaline shots. The math of a shrinking nation. Because while the lights are on in Milan, the lights are going out in the rest of the country, and the bill for the party has just arrived in the mail. Now. You might think the solution is to just grow our way out of it. Wrong. The medals have been handed out, the fireworks have cleared, the world's cameras have packed up and moved on to the next spectacle, leaving behind a silence that is louder than the cheers ever were. We were told this was a beginning, a new renaissance for the Italian spirit. But now that the adrenaline has worn off, let's recap your journey. Let's look at what was actually spent. First, you lost certainty. You were told this was a gift from the private sector, a sustainable miracle. Instead, you found a bill for €5 billion, 92% of which was pinned to a taxpayer base that is shrinking by the day. Then you lost control. You watched as centuries-old forests were cleared and hospitals were defunded to build a bobsled track for 40 people. Decisions weren't made for the citizens of the Alps. They were made for the legacy of politicians who will be retired by the time the maintenance bills come due. Finally, you lost time. Italy spent 7 years planning, building and obsessing over 16 days in February. That is 7 years where the structural rot of the economy was ignored. 7 years where the doping of construction masked the fact that the heart of the nation, its youth and its innovation, is flatlining. Luca still has his cafe, he has his new espresso machine, and he has a debt that will take him the rest of his working life to pay off. The gold rush lasted 2 weeks. The interest payments will last 2 decades. The Milano Cortina Olympics were never about sport. They were a €5 billion mirage. It is a metaphor for a global phenomenon, the event economy. A system where nations that can no longer produce real growth choose to produce moments. It is a gold-plated mask wrapped in a flag deep-fried in debt. It is the act of a country renovating its past because it has lost the courage to build a future. Once you see the mechanism, you cannot unsee it. Whether it is a stadium in your hometown or a special economic zone in a dying city, the logic is the same. Activity is not growth. And a party you can't afford is just a funeral with better music. Italy didn't need a Winter Olympics. It needed a demographic miracle, a debt restructuring, and a reason for its young people to stay. Instead, it got a bobsled track. Let that sink in. If you're living in a city that's currently bidding for a mega event, or if you've seen the Olympic ghost haunt your own backyard, tell us the story in the comments. I'll be reading them tonight. If you want to see the math that the brochures leave out, hit subscribe. We're just getting started. Enjoy the view while it lasts.